It all started with a letter taped to my door. At first glance, I thought it was just another notice from the HOA, maybe about lawn care or parking. But as I read, my heart dropped. They weren't talking about grass or garbage cans. They were talking about my dog. The words were cold and sharp. According to them, my dog was a violation, and I had 7 days to remove him from the property. Remove him? That's not just some random pet they were talking about. That's my service animal. That's my lifeline. You see, my dog isn't like any other. He isn't a hobby or a toy or just a companion. He's trained to help me every single day. He alerts me when I'm in danger. He calms me when my body and mind fail me. He is the reason I can live independently without needing constant help. Without him, things get very difficult. So when I read that letter, it felt like someone was ripping the ground right out from under me. But the part that stung the most? The letter wasn't even signed by the HOA board. It was signed by one person. Karen. If you've ever dealt with a neighborhood HOA, you already know the type. The self-appointed rule enforcer. The kind of person who believes the neighborhood belongs to her. Karen was known for nitpicking every tiny thing. Mailboxes not painted the same shade, flower pots in the wrong spot, cars parked half an inch too close to the curb. But this was different. She wasn't just being controlling. She was trying to take away the one thing I absolutely could not live without. At first, I laughed in disbelief. I thought, surely this is some mistake. Surely once I explain, they'll back off. But the more I thought about it, the angrier I became. Because it wasn't a mistake. Karen knew exactly what she was doing. She thought she could bully me into giving up my dog. She thought I wouldn't fight back. She thought she had all the power, because the HOA had a reputation for being strict and unforgiving. But what she didn't know was that she had just picked a fight she couldn't win. I remember sitting on my couch, the letter still in my hand, and looking at my dog lying peacefully at my feet. He had no idea what was happening. He didn't know that some stranger had decided he didn't belong. He didn't know that his very existence was being questioned. And that moment lit a fire inside me. No one, especially not Karen, was going to take him away from me. The funny thing is, Karen probably thought this was going to be easy. She probably thought I'd panic, that I'd pack up and leave, or worse, that I'd give my dog away. But she didn't understand who she was dealing with. She didn't know that my dog wasn't just protected by me. He was protected by federal law. He wasn't just a pet. He was a service animal, legally recognized and shielded under the Americans with Disabilities Act. And that meant that no HOA, no board, and no Karen could touch him. But here's the thing. You don't just go storming into a fight like this. You wait. You plan. You let them dig their own hole. Because once Karen started down this path, she wasn't going to stop. And I knew exactly how to let her expose herself. Still, in that first moment, I didn't think about the strategy. I thought about the nights when my dog woke me up just before my condition could turn dangerous. I thought about the times he nudged me away from panic before it swallowed me whole. I thought about the quiet comfort of knowing that no matter what, I wasn't alone. And then I thought about someone like Karen, someone who saw none of that, who only saw rules and violations. To her, he wasn't a hero. He wasn't my lifeline. He was just a problem to be erased. That thought burned me. So I made a choice. I wasn't just going to defend my dog. I was going to make sure Karen, and everyone else in that HOA, understood exactly what it meant to cross the line. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about standing up to bullies who thought rules gave them power over people's lives. This was about showing them that not all rules are above the law. And so it began, with a single letter on my door. A piece of paper that tried to take away my future. A notice signed by someone who thought she had the authority to decide who belongs and who doesn't. She had no idea that the battle she had just started would flip everything upside down. She had no clue that the very rules she tried to weaponize against me would end up backfiring on her in the most humiliating way. Before all this chaos began, life in the neighborhood was calm enough. I kept to myself, worked on my own schedule, and enjoyed the little routines that gave me peace. My mornings always started the same way. I'd brew a cup of coffee, step out onto the porch, and watch my dog stretch in the sunlight. He was more than a pet. Every move he made was trained, purposeful, and focused on me. He watched my body language, listened for changes in my breathing, and knew exactly when to intervene if something wasn't right. He wasn't loud. He wasn't aggressive. He was steady, loyal, and exactly what I needed. Neighbors would often see us walking quietly down the street. Some smiled and waved. Others kept to themselves. Most didn't know he was a service animal, and that was fine. I never felt the need to explain. But if anyone asked, I would tell them. I'd explain that he wasn't just for company. He was trained to assist me with medical needs. Without him, daily life could turn dangerous in a heartbeat. With him, I had safety, confidence, and independence. For a while, the neighborhood felt like a safe place. Nobody bothered me, and I didn't bother them. But peace never lasts long when someone like Karen lives nearby. It started small. A complaint about my trash bin being a few inches out of line. A note about my car tire touching the edge of the grass. It was always something petty, always signed off with her name. I ignored most of it. Fighting over nonsense wasn't worth my energy. But then Karen's eyes turned toward my dog. I'll never forget the first time she made a scene about him. I was sitting on the porch, sipping coffee, when she marched across the street with her arms folded. She didn't even say hello. She pointed directly at him and said, "That dog is too big for this neighborhood. He doesn't belong here." I stared at her, stunned by the boldness. Too big. He was well-behaved, on a leash, lying calmly at my feet. He wasn't barking, wasn't roaming, wasn't causing any harm. Yet she looked at him like he was some wild animal. I tried to explain politely. He's my service animal. He's trained and he's protected. But Karen didn't care. Her face tightened, and she shook her head like she had already made up her mind. From that day on, her complaints grew louder. She called the HOA board and told them my dog was a threat. She told neighbors he made her feel unsafe. She even claimed he violated the pet size rules written in the HOA handbook. It was like she had made it her personal mission to get rid of him. The worst part was the way she twisted the story. She never mentioned that he was a service animal. She never mentioned the training or the law. She just painted a picture of a dangerous, oversized dog terrorizing the neighborhood. And some people, not knowing any better, started to believe her. I'd catch whispers when I walked past, or see people looking twice when they saw us together. It wasn't fair, but that's the power people like Karen love to use, fear and gossip. I could have stayed quiet. I could have tried to avoid her, to hope she would get bored and move on to someone else. But this was my dog, my protector, my partner. Avoiding her wasn't an option. Every time I looked into his eyes, I felt the weight of what she was trying to do. She wasn't just threatening an animal. She was threatening my independence. Things escalated quickly. First, it was verbal warnings. Then came the letters. The HOA board, clearly pushed by Karen's constant nagging, started sending official notices. Each one was harsher than the last. They said I was out of compliance. They said I was subject to fines. They even hinted that legal action could be taken if I refused to comply. Imagine reading those words while your dog sits quietly by your side, doing nothing wrong. Imagine being told that the one creature who makes your life possible is suddenly a violation. I started to realize that Karen wouldn't stop. This wasn't about rules. This was personal. Maybe she didn't like that I ignored her petty demands. Maybe she hated that she couldn't control me. Or maybe, deep down, she was just jealous of something she couldn't understand. Whatever the reason, her mission was clear. She wanted my dog gone. Every encounter with her became more tense. She'd show up on the sidewalk, watching us walk past. She'd mutter under her breath. Sometimes she'd shout about rules and proper conduct. Neighbors began to avoid the conflict by walking away when she appeared. It was as if everyone knew she was going too far, but no one wanted to be the one to tell her. For me, though, silence wasn't an option. Each day, I felt the pressure building. Each notice, each glare, each whispered complaint pushed me closer to the edge. Karen thought she had all the power. She thought the HOA would back her no matter what. She thought she could wear me down until I finally gave up. But what she didn't know was that I was ready. I had proof. I had the law on my side. And when the time came, I was going to use it in a way she'd never forget. The first official notice from the HOA came in a plain white envelope. No warmth, no conversation, just a piece of paper stamped with authority. It said my dog was in violation of community rules. According to them, animals over a certain weight weren't permitted in the neighborhood. They listed fines, deadlines, and the possibility of legal action if I didn't correct the issue. Correct the issue? They were talking about my service dog as if he was some kind of broken fence or an overgrown lawn. Reading it made my blood boil. I kept the letter on my kitchen table for hours, just staring at it. I knew exactly where it had come from. The board may have signed it, but Karen's fingerprints were all over it. She was the one who pushed it through. She was the one who whispered in their ears and stirred up fear. I imagined her smug face when she slid her own copy into a file folder, proud that she had caught me breaking the rules. To her, this was probably just another victory. But for me, this was the start of a fight I didn't want but couldn't avoid. The next morning, I decided to walk my dog as usual. I wasn't going to hide. I wasn't going to let her think she had scared me into staying indoors. The sun was barely up, and the streets were quiet. My dog trotted calmly beside me, his harness snug and secure, his eyes alert but gentle. He wasn't barking, he wasn't running loose, and he wasn't bothering a soul. And yet, before I even made it halfway down the block, there she was. Karen. She stepped out from behind her front gate like she had been waiting for me. Arms crossed, lips tight, eyes glaring. "You got the notice, didn't you?" she snapped. Her tone wasn't curious. It was triumphant, like she had already won. I stopped and looked at her, keeping my voice calm. "Yes, I got it. And you should know, he's not a violation. He's a service animal." Karen scoffed. She actually rolled her eyes. "Service animal? Please. That's just what everyone says when they don't want to follow the rules. Look at him. He's way too big. He's dangerous. Dangerous." The word hung in the air like poison. My dog, who had never once growled at a neighbor, who had been trained to be calm in every situation, was being painted as a threat simply because Karen wanted it that way. I felt my hands tighten into fists, but I forced myself to stay steady. Losing my temper would only feed her story. "He's federally protected," I said slowly. "You can't ban him. The law is clear." But Karen didn't care about the law. She leaned in closer, lowering her voice but sharpening her words. "I don't care what you say he is. That animal doesn't belong here. And if you don't get rid of him, the HOA will make sure you do." Then she turned and walked away, leaving me standing there in silence. My dog nudged my leg, sensing my tension, his eyes watching me carefully. He knew something was wrong, even if he didn't understand the details. From that moment on, the pressure escalated. The HOA letters kept coming. Each one was harsher than the last. They accused me of ignoring warnings, of disrespecting the community, of creating a hostile environment. Hostile. Can you imagine? A quiet man walking with his trained service dog was now considered a problem for the entire neighborhood. Karen, of course, didn't stop with the board. She spread her campaign like wildfire. She whispered to neighbors during morning walks, hinting that my dog was unpredictable. She told families that their kids weren't safe when we walked past. She even claimed that she had seen him lunge, which was an outright lie. My dog had never lunged at anyone in his life. But Karen's voice carried weight, and some people were too nervous to question her. The hardest part was the stares. People I used to wave at now avoided eye contact. Parents pulled their children closer when I walked by. A neighbor I'd shared small talk with at the mailbox suddenly stopped speaking to me altogether. The isolation stung more than the fines, more than the letters. It felt like Karen was winning, slowly turning the community against me. But she underestimated me. She thought I was just going to crumble under the pressure. She thought I would get tired of fighting and give in. What she didn't realize was that every letter I received, every whisper I overheard, every glare I caught from across the street, it was all fuel. Fuel to make me push back harder. Fuel to remind me why my dog was more than just a companion. I started documenting everything. Every letter, every notice, every interaction with Karen. I kept records of my dog's training, his certifications, and the legal protections that applied to him. I wasn't going to be caught off guard. When the time came, I wanted to have everything ready. Karen believed she was tightening the noose, but what she didn't know was that she was only digging her own trap. Every word she spoke, every false claim she made, was leading her closer to the one moment she could never undo. The more Karen pushed, the more aggressive the HOA became. What started as polite warnings quickly turned into threats written in bold letters. They said fines would increase each week. I refused to comply. They said my access to neighborhood amenities could be revoked. They even hinted that a lawsuit could be filed against me for endangering the community. Endangering. That word made me laugh bitterly. My dog, calm and trained, was now being painted as a danger just because Karen had decided he was. Each notice felt heavier than the last. They were trying to wear me down, to make me feel cornered. But instead of panicking, I stayed quiet. I let them think they were winning. I let them believe their intimidation was working. Behind the scenes, I was preparing. I read everything I could about service animal protections. I highlighted sections of the law. I kept every single piece of evidence in a folder. Every notice, every false claim, every neighbor's whispered comment. I wasn't just defending myself anymore. I was building a case. Still, the emotional toll was real. I'd sit on the porch in the evenings, watching my dog rest at my feet, and wonder how anyone could see him as a threat. He never barked at passing cars. He never chased after joggers or bikes. He didn't even care about the neighborhood cats that wandered through the yards. To me, he was a symbol of peace. To Karen, he was the enemy. One night, I overheard Karen talking loudly to another neighbor by the mailboxes. She wanted to make sure I heard her. "That dog is dangerous," she said, her voice dripping with fake concern. "I don't know why he thinks he can just bring a huge animal into this neighborhood. Rules are rules. And if he can't follow them, maybe he doesn't belong here either." It wasn't enough that she targeted my dog. Now she was hinting that I should leave too. That stung more than anything. I had worked hard to build a life here, to create a sense of normalcy. And Karen wanted to erase all of it just to feed her need for control. The board scheduled a compliance meeting. It was basically a trial, with me sitting in front of a panel of neighbors who had already been poisoned by Karen's words. I walked in calm, but inside, I felt the weight of every eye in the room. They asked questions about my dog, about his size, about why I thought the rules didn't apply to me. They didn't ask once about his training. They didn't ask once about the law. It was clear they weren't interested in facts. They just wanted me gone. But I stayed calm. I answered every question with short, steady words. He is a service animal. He is protected under federal law. Your rules cannot override his rights. Each time I said it, I saw the irritation grow on their faces. They weren't used to people standing up to them. They were used to people folding under the weight of their authority. But I wasn't folding. After the meeting, Karen smirked as she walked past me. "You won't win," she whispered. Her confidence was almost laughable. She thought the board was untouchable. She thought her gossip was enough to bury me. But what she didn't realize was that every word she spoke in that room had been noted. Every false accusation she made was now part of my growing file. The next week, the pressure didn't ease. Karen doubled down. She followed me during my morning walks, snapping pictures on her phone as if my dog was committing a crime. She shouted from across the street that I was selfish, that I was putting the whole neighborhood at risk. Some people avoided the drama, but a few seemed to take her side, nodding along as she spewed her lies. I let it happen. I let her create a scene. Because the bigger her performance, the easier it would be to prove her harassment later. Behind closed doors, I called state agencies. I spoke with disability advocates. I made sure I knew every word of the law. I wasn't just defending my right to have my dog. I was preparing to turn the entire situation back on Karen. She thought she was applying pressure, but in reality, she was giving me everything I needed. It was like watching someone tighten a rope around their own neck, not realizing they were the one pulling it. Karen believed she was building a case against me, but all she was really doing was exposing her own ignorance, her own cruelty, her own obsession with control. And soon, all of it was going to come crashing down. Karen didn't slow down. If anything, her attacks became bolder. One afternoon, as I was unloading groceries from my car, she stormed over, phone in hand, already recording. Her voice was sharp, almost theatrical, like she wanted the whole world to hear. "This is proof," she shouted. "This animal is out of control. He's too big, too dangerous, and he doesn't belong here." My dog sat quietly beside me, leash secure, tail still. He didn't bark. He didn't pull. He just looked up at me, waiting for the signal that everything was fine. And yet, Karen kept screaming like she was in the middle of an attack. Neighbors peeked out from their windows. A few even stepped onto their porches, drawn by the noise. Karen waved her phone at them. "See, this is what I've been talking about. This is the threat I've been warning you all about." I stood still, heart pounding but voice steady. "He is a service animal. He is protected by federal law. You cannot remove him." I said it loudly enough for everyone to hear. Karen froze for a moment, then scoffed. "That's just an excuse. You can slap a vest on any dog and call it a service animal. Doesn't make it true." The words cut deep. She wasn't just questioning me now. She was insulting the years of training my dog had gone through, the hours of work, the discipline, the dedication that made him capable of saving my life. But instead of shouting back, I let the silence do the work. I bent down, gave my dog a pat on the shoulder, and walked past her without another word. The neighbors who had come out watched carefully. They saw the difference. My dog calm, her voice shrill. My silence, her chaos. From that moment, I realized Karen was losing control of her narrative. She was still loud, still aggressive, but people were beginning to see through her performance. Some neighbors even started approaching me quietly. They asked questions, simple ones. Is he really a service animal? What does he do for you? Is it true the HOA can't touch him? Each time, I answered honestly. I explained his role, his training, the law. The more I spoke, the more they nodded. The more Karen shouted, the more foolish she looked. But Karen wasn't ready to stop. The very next week, another notice came. This one was harsher than all the rest. It demanded immediate removal of the dog, threatened steep fines, and warned of further legal escalation. The language was bold, meant to scare me. But instead of fear, I felt a strange calm. Because I knew what they didn't. I knew that with each notice, they were digging their own hole deeper. I copied the letter, added it to my growing file, and picked up the phone. This time, I called an attorney who specialized in disability rights. I explained everything. The letters, the harassment, the false claims. When I finished, there was a pause on the other end of the line, then a steady voice said, "They're in violation. They don't have a case. If they push this further, it's them who will pay the price." That was the moment I knew the tide was turning. I wasn't just on the defensive anymore. I was ready to fight back. And the more Karen pushed, the more she gave me the ammunition I needed. Still, she wasn't done playing games. A few days later, I was walking my dog near the lake at the edge of the neighborhood when she appeared again, this time with 2 HOA board members at her side. She pointed at me like a prosecutor in a courtroom. "There he is. There's the violation." One of the board members cleared his throat, trying to look serious. "We've received multiple complaints," he said. "We need to resolve this matter quickly." I looked each of them in the eye, then pointed to my dog's vest. Clear letters stitched across the side, "Service Animal. This dog is protected. Every letter you've sent, every threat you've made, every word she's spoken, it's all unlawful." The board members shifted uncomfortably. Karen's face flushed red. She opened her mouth to argue, but no words came. For the first time, she looked rattled. My dog stood tall beside me, steady as ever. And in that moment, I realized something Karen never would. Power isn't in the loudest voice or the biggest threat or the most aggressive lie. Real power comes from truth. And the truth was standing right next to me, calm, loyal, and completely untouchable. The board didn't back off after that encounter. If anything, they tried harder to make it look like they were in control. Another meeting was scheduled, this time labeled as mandatory. The letter claimed I had to attend to resolve ongoing violations. They thought they could corner me in a room again, pile on their rules, and pressure me into giving in. But what they didn't realize was that I wasn't walking into that meeting empty-handed. I had my folder. I had every notice, every recording, every screenshot of Karen's harassment. And most importantly, I had the law. The day of the meeting, the room was filled with board members, a few curious neighbors, and of course, Karen sitting in the front row like she was the star of the show. Her arms were folded, her smirk wide, as if she'd already won. She barely waited for the meeting to start before blurting out, "He's still here with that animal. We've been more than patient, but this can't continue. The rules are the rules." The board chair cleared his throat, trying to sound official. "We've received multiple complaints regarding your dog. He exceeds the weight limit, and our guidelines clearly state that pets must remain within those restrictions." He emphasized the word pets, as if that settled it. I let him finish, then opened my folder and placed a copy of the Americans with Disabilities Act right on the table. "My dog isn't a pet," I said calmly. "He is a service animal. Under federal law, he is not subject to your pet rules. You cannot ban him. You cannot fine me. You cannot threaten me. Every letter you've sent, every threat you've made, is a direct violation of my rights." The room went silent for a moment. A few neighbors shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. One board member leaned forward, squinting at the papers like he wasn't sure what he was looking at. Karen, however, laughed. "Oh, please. That's just a printout from the internet. You can't just bring papers in here and act like the law doesn't apply. We have rules." I turned toward her, keeping my voice steady. "The law doesn't just apply. It overrides. Your rules cannot erase federal protection. My dog isn't here because I want to bend the rules. He's here because I need him. And you don't get to decide that." Karen's face flushed red. She opened her mouth to argue again, but the board chair raised his hand to silence her. He was nervous now, realizing this wasn't just about HOA bylaws. "We'll need to review this," he muttered, glancing at the papers like they were a ticking bomb. That's when I knew the cracks were forming. For weeks, they had acted like their power was absolute. But now, faced with the law, they looked small. Unsure. Exposed. And Karen hated it. She shifted in her seat, her smirk gone, replaced by tight lips and darting eyes. For the first time, she wasn't in control. After the meeting, I walked out with my dog at my side, his head held high, his steps calm and steady. A couple of neighbors lingered by the door, waiting until Karen was out of earshot before whispering to me. "I didn't know the rules didn't apply to service animals," one said softly. "She made it sound like you were just ignoring everything." Another added, "I'm sorry for not asking sooner. He's such a good dog." Those small words mattered more than they probably realized. They meant the tide was starting to turn. People were beginning to see the truth, to see Karen for what she really was. Not a protector of the neighborhood. Not a guardian of rules. Just a bully with too much free time and a desperate need to control others. Of course, Karen didn't give up. That night, she posted a long rant on the neighborhood forum, claiming the board was being manipulated, that I was playing the disability card to get around the rules. She tried to twist the story again, paint me as the villain. But the more she wrote, the more desperate she sounded. And the more desperate she sounded, the more neighbors began to question everything she had said before. I sat back and let her words hang in the air. I didn't need to argue online or shout louder than her. The evidence spoke for itself. The law was on my side. And every step my dog took beside me was proof that no matter how many times she tried to erase him, he wasn't going anywhere. Karen had started this fight thinking she was untouchable. But now, she was the one scrambling, the one losing her grip. And as the pressure shifted, I realized something important. The louder she became, the closer she was to falling apart completely. Karen's rant didn't slow down after that night. If anything, it only fueled her obsession. She was up early the next morning, standing outside near my driveway with her phone out, pretending to record evidence. Every time my dog walked by, she muttered things like, "dangerous," "aggressive," "unfit for the neighborhood." She said it loud enough so that anyone nearby could hear, hoping to plant seeds of doubt. But my dog didn't even flinch. He walked calmly, eyes focused, completely ignoring her. That calmness made her look even more ridiculous, like she was yelling at thin air. Later that week, she escalated. I received another notice from the HOA, this one marked urgent. It claimed I was in breach of safety standards, and that an investigation was underway. At the bottom of the letter, it even threatened that removal of the animal may be considered if violations persist. That was the moment I realized Karen had gone beyond harassment. She was trying to scare me into giving up. But what she didn't know was that every single threat she made only built my case stronger. I decided to push back harder. I wrote a formal response, attaching copies of federal guidelines, and I sent it not just to the board, but also to the HOA's legal counsel. I made it clear, any further attempt to interfere with my service dog would result in legal action under the ADA. That wasn't just a warning, it was a promise. The silence from the board after that letter was almost deafening. For the first time, they weren't flooding my mailbox with threats. They weren't leaving notes on my door. Instead, it was just Karen, standing alone in her crusade, growing more unhinged as the days went on. She knocked on my door one evening, shouting through the wood. "You think the law makes you special? You think you can just bring that thing in here, and the rest of us have to suffer?" Her voice cracked halfway through her rant, and that's when it hit me. She wasn't just angry, she was desperate. Word around the neighborhood started to shift. People who had once stayed quiet began to push back against her. At the mailbox, one neighbor told me, "Honestly, she's making a fool of herself. Everyone can see your dog isn't a problem." Another neighbor added, "She tried to get us to sign a petition last night. Nobody wanted to. We're tired of her." Karen didn't like that she was losing her audience. Without people backing her up, her power started to fade. So she doubled down again, this time calling animal control. 2 officers showed up at my door, looking slightly embarrassed. "We got a complaint," one of them said, scratching his head. I invited them in, introduced them to my dog, and handed them the paperwork proving his service status. The officer glanced through the documents, patted my dog gently, and shook his head. "He's perfectly fine. We'll be closing this out." As they walked back to their truck, I saw Karen watching from across the street, her arms crossed, her face pale. The next day, she tried another angle. She called a neighborhood safety meeting at the clubhouse. She plastered the community bulletin with flyers about protecting residents from dangerous animals. But this time, people showed up not to support her, but to question her. I heard one neighbor ask, "Karen, have you actually seen this dog do anything wrong?" Another added, "You're making it sound like he's attacking people, but we've all seen him. He's calm." Her voice grew sharper as she argued back, but the more she spoke, the more obvious it became that she had no real evidence. She was just spinning stories, twisting fears, and hoping someone would bite. But no one did. By the end of the night, even the board looked exhausted, like they were finally realizing she was dragging the entire HOA into a fight they couldn't win. I walked out of that meeting with my dog by my side, and for the first time, I felt the shift fully settle in. The crowd wasn't staring at me anymore, they were staring at her. Karen had wanted to make me the problem, but now the neighborhood was starting to see the truth. She wasn't defending rules. She wasn't protecting anyone. She was obsessed, out of control, and losing whatever grip she once had. And the more her grip slipped, the more it became clear that this battle wasn't about rules at all. It was about power, and she was running out of it fast. Karen didn't take the humiliation at that meeting lightly. The very next morning, she was on a mission again, storming around the neighborhood with a folder of papers in her hand. She waved them like they were proof of something big, cornering anyone who would listen. I overheard her telling a couple walking their kids to school, "The HOA board has been too lenient. If they won't act, I'll take this matter to court myself." She spoke with this shaky conviction, as if she was trying to convince herself more than anyone else. The couple just nodded politely, then walked away quickly. The truth was, people were starting to avoid her. That afternoon, I received a knock on my door. Not from Karen this time, but from one of the HOA board members. He looked tired, almost worn down, and he asked if he could step inside. He sat at my dining table and rubbed his forehead before speaking. "Look," he said, "we never wanted this to go this far. We've had dozens of complaints from Karen, but the truth is, most of the board knows your dog isn't a problem. She's just relentless." I listened quietly, letting him talk, because it was the first time any of them had admitted what I already knew. He went on to say that Karen had filed a formal petition demanding the removal of my dog. She wanted it on the agenda for the next HOA meeting, which meant it was going to be discussed in front of everyone. Instead of feeling nervous, I felt something else, a strange calm. Because unlike Karen, I had the truth, the law, and the paperwork to back me up. If she wanted a public showdown, I was ready. The night of the meeting arrived, and the clubhouse was packed. People filled the chairs, stood against the walls, and even spilled out into the hallway. Karen sat near the front with her stack of papers, her expression tight and smug, like she was finally about to win. When it was her turn to speak, she launched into a dramatic speech. She painted pictures of dangerous behavior, of children at risk, of liability waiting to happen. Every sentence was exaggerated, every detail twisted. She held up her papers, shaking them in the air as if they were proof. When she finally stopped, the room went quiet. All eyes turned to me. I stood, keeping my voice steady, and explained everything clearly. I told them about my dog's training, his service status, and the protection he had under federal law. I handed copies of official documents to the board, letting the facts speak for themselves. Then I said something that made the room shift. This isn't about violations. This is about harassment. And it's not just me she's harassing, it's this entire community. She's wasting your time, your money, and your energy. A murmur rippled through the room. People nodded. Some whispered. For the first time, Karen looked rattled. She tried to interrupt, but the board silenced her. One of them spoke firmly. "Karen, we've investigated multiple times. This dog is not a threat. This issue is closed." The blow to her pride was visible. Her face flushed red, her hands trembling as she gathered her papers. She tried to argue again, but the board cut her off, moving on to the next agenda item. The meeting continued, but Karen sat there in silence, fuming, no longer the center of attention. Afterward, neighbors came up to me quietly. Some apologized for not stepping in sooner. Others told me they admired how calmly I handled it. One elderly neighbor smiled and whispered, "She's been pulling stunts like this for years. You're the first one who stood your ground." As I walked home with my dog, I could feel the shift even more. Karen was still out there, but her power was gone. She had tried to turn the community against me, but in the end, she only exposed herself. And deep down, I knew she wouldn't stop completely. People like her rarely do. But now the tables had turned. She wasn't feared anymore. She was just noise in the background, and everyone was starting to see it. The days after the HOA meeting felt different, almost like a heavy weight had been lifted from the neighborhood. For the first time in weeks, people were stopping me on walks, not to ask about complaints or rumors, but to pet my dog, to smile, to make small talk. The whispers that once circled around us had shifted. Now, instead of questioning glances, I got nods of quiet respect. It was clear, Karen had overplayed her hand, and everyone knew it. Even the HOA board seemed to change their tone. A few days later, I received an official letter, not filled with threats or vague warnings, but with a simple acknowledgement. The matter regarding my dog was considered closed. They even included a line about reviewing their policies to prevent frivolous complaints from being weaponized against residents in the future. Reading that, I couldn't help but smile. It wasn't just a win for me. It was a win for anyone who'd ever been targeted unfairly. But Karen, of course, couldn't let it go so easily. I saw her once or twice after the meeting, pacing her yard, glaring from across the street. She muttered things under her breath when I passed, but her voice carried no weight anymore. People stopped entertaining her rants. Neighbors she once manipulated were now avoiding her. The power she held through fear and persistence had crumbled. She was left standing alone, clutching her folders, with no one willing to listen. One afternoon, as I was bringing groceries inside, one of the board members stopped by again. He sighed and told me something I already suspected. Honestly, we let her push us too far. She's been a problem for years, but we gave in because it was easier. You didn't. And that's what it took for us to finally draw a line. His words confirmed it. Karen had thrived because no one had stood up to her firmly enough. Now, with her credibility gone, the board was no longer shielding her behavior. Meanwhile, my dog, who had been at the center of all this drama, continued doing what he did best. Calmly, quietly, he went about his work. He wasn't just my companion. He was my lifeline. On days when my anxiety tried to take over, he grounded me. In crowded places, he gave me balance and focus. Watching him trot proudly by my side after everything, I felt a deep sense of pride too. He wasn't just protected by law. He had earned his place by my side 100 times over. As weeks turned into months, Karen's influence faded to the background. The HOA carried on with actual community concerns, repairs, landscaping, events. Neighbors who once avoided me started inviting me to barbecues, waving when I passed, even asking if they could bring treats for my dog. The shift was undeniable. By standing firm, I hadn't just defended my rights. I had changed how people saw the balance of power in the neighborhood. Karen, meanwhile, became a shadow of her old self. The same woman who once stormed meetings, slammed doors, and spread rumors now lingered quietly on her porch, watching a world that no longer revolved around her. And though part of me expected her to stage another fight, it never came. Maybe she realized the community wouldn't back her anymore. Maybe she finally saw that she couldn't twist the rules to her liking. Whatever the reason, the silence was its own kind of victory. Looking back, I realized something bigger than just winning against Karen. This wasn't only about me or my dog. It was about every person who has ever been bullied by someone hiding behind rules, twisting them for control. People like Karen thrive on intimidation. They count on silence. But silence only feeds them. The moment you stand tall, armed with truth and calm resolve, they start to crumble. Walking my dog one evening, the sun setting golden across the street, I felt a peace I hadn't known since the day all this began. My dog nudged my hand, reminding me in his quiet way that life goes on, that strength doesn't have to be loud to be powerful. And as we walked past Karen's house, her blinds snapping shut the moment she saw us, I couldn't help but think this battle was over. Not with shouting, not with drama, but with patience, persistence, and the law on my side. And from that moment forward, every step I took with my dog wasn't just a walk. It was a reminder that the right to live freely without harassment had been earned. Not just for me, but for anyone who dares to stand up when someone tries to take away what can't be taken.